Here, I'll show you how to make a wildcard lookup that will return all matches in Excel. And using this formula, we can, for instance, look for this value in this list right here and return a corresponding value from this list. So you can see it working right here. And I have an example where the wildcard is being used and with no wildcard. So we look for green, we get all the matching results right here. But now let's look for, say, red. And when we have the wildcard search, it will return ASC-1, which you notice has red in the middle of the cell. And that's the beautiful thing about wildcard searches. It doesn't have to match the entire cell's contents. It can match something that comes in the middle, the beginning, or the end of the cell, as well as the other cells where it matches the entire cell contents. It doesn't matter. And here I'll show you how to make this awesome custom formula that does this. It is not technically a Vlookup or an index match lookup formula, but it does exactly what those guys do, just better. Before we start, check the video description and click the link to Teach Excel so you can download the files for the tutorial and follow along. And make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials. This tutorial is very similar to the Vlookup to return all matches tutorial, and I'm going to use that custom formula as the base formula, and then we're going to change one part of it. It might be a little bit more than a minor change. So if you already know how this works and you're pretty comfortable with it, then you can just download the file and copy paste this guy into your workbook. You'll notice that the change is right here. Now, how this tutorial is going to work is I'm going to first show you how to change this formula to work for your data set, and then I'm going to explain how the formula works, and then if you're still around, I will explain exactly how every piece of this formula works, and I'm going to deconstruct it into its tiniest parts. And before I show you how this one works, I want to make a note that there is the version that has no wildcard search over here. And the change is this. You can see that this is much simpler in this version. So this one I covered in the other tutorial where it's not a wildcard search. Now I call this a wildcard search, but there are multiple wildcards. The one that this one refers to is the asterisk. If that doesn't make sense to you, don't worry about it, but if you know wildcard characters, that's the one that we're going to deal with, the one that will find the value anywhere in the cell, basically. Okay. So if you want to make this work for your data set, download the file, copy paste it into your workbook, and here we go. The first range reference right here, this is the range that has the values that you'd like to return. So right here I want to return the things, so I select that. Next thing to change is the lookup value. This is what you're going to be searching for. I have it set to this cell right here. Next thing is the table where you're going to search for that lookup value right here. Now it doesn't have to be to the left of the result you'd like to return. It could be anywhere. It just has to be the same size. That's very important. Moving on to the next one, we have the same range reference right here. Make sure you update that. Then we have this one, A2. This is the first cell of this range reference. That's very important. And after that, you're good to go. So just a few changes, and it's going to work for your data set. And of course, if you wanted to hard code this in, you could. It's up to you, but it wouldn't really be the best idea. And actually for this one, there is something that you can change here. This is the search function. If you want, you can make it the find function. So if we do go to equals and type find, you'll notice at the very end here, find is case sensitive. And you can see with search, it is not case sensitive. So basically they do the same thing, but one cares about capital letters and one doesn't. By default, I have the one that does not care here, so you'll notice that. Get out of that. If I make this capital, nothing will change. And that's the last thing that you could change here. Just that. But you don't have to if you don't need to. So once you have one good formula, just copy it down as far as you need to so that you can show all the results that you need to show. And that's all you have to do for your workbook. Now, I'm not going to cover the no wildcard one. I just have that here for reference in case you watched the previous tutorial on that and you want to compare these two. But they're very similar formulas anyway. Now, here, I'm going to try to give you a good explanation of how this guy works, and then we'll deconstruct it. Starting off with the if error, this guy just catches any errors that are thrown out by the index and returns nothing. And that is why down here we have these beautiful blank spaces instead of errors. And now once we get into the meat of it, that is right here, this is where the magic happens. So basically this is kind of like a giant index match lookup. We have the index function, we have the data that we'd like to return, and then we have this next section right here whose sole purpose is to tell us from which row, which index right here, we would like to return a value. So do I want to return it from row 1 and get ASC-1 or 2 or 3 or 4 and so on. All of this that's highlighted, that's all it does. It spits out an index number to the index function. And of course, that's where it gets tricky. The small function, it's kind of confusing if I explain now, so I'll come back to it in a moment. This right here, the if function, is actually what is going to return a series of index numbers or false values. So if right now I hit F9, you're going to see a bunch of false values and some index numbers. And then we just use the small function to return the correct number. So small function's not going to work on the false values. It'll only see the numbers, and we say, hey, I want to return the smallest value. Okay, gives me the 1. Next smallest gives me the 4, then gives me the 6. That's where the small function comes in. And maybe I skipped ahead just a little bit there. But let's back it up. And now let's see how the if function works. So this guy right here, this is what performs a search, and then it converts the results into a bunch of true-false values. And for every value that is true, it's going to go over here, and it's going to return the corresponding index number. So if we find a match, it will return true, then it will go over here and return the corresponding index number. Then we spit that out back to small, where it gets all those false and index number values in a list. And then we do a little trick with the row function in order to return the first smallest, second smallest, third smallest, and so on when we copy the formula down. So when we copy this formula down, you'll notice it's absolute cell references for everything. So how does it do its magic? Well, this right here, because it's row 1, 1 now, but when I copy it down, it'll be row 2, 2, row 3, 3, and that returns rows 1, 2, 3. So notice when I go down here, it's row 2, 2, and then when I go down to the next one, it will once again be incremented by 1, so it's row 3, 3. And one thing that I almost forgot to mention is that these are array formulas. This is an array formula. So you have to input it hitting Control-Shift-Enter if you are in an older version of Excel. Apparently in the newer versions of Excel, you just don't have to do that. I'm typing in here, I just hit Enter, and it does everything without issue. So you won't hear me say Control-Shift-Enter, Control-Shift-Enter. But you may need to do that on your end, and it will not hurt in newer versions of Excel if I do it. You will still get the curly braces in the formula bar that shows you have an array formula in there, but you just don't need it anymore. So, all right, now it is time for us to deconstruct this lovely, crazy, giant formula. And if you've watched some of my other videos on this, you know what is about to happen. We are going to take this guy and we are going to bring him down here and break him into a million pieces. All right, so let's go with the base formula right there. Make sure we've got that. And now that that's in there, all good. Let us open it up and we are going to take out the first chunk, which is this index chunk. You can see this is one big chunk, then we just have it in the if error function. All right, let's go down here, equals index, and when I hit enter, we're going to get the first result, no errors because, well, there's no error that's returned from this. Now what we have is simply the table where we'd like to return the values, this guy right here, this range. We don't need to pull that out. And we have this big guy. And this is what we're going to pull out now. Now in here, let us pull out the if statement. And we are slowly getting to where we need to be. All right. Now, the if statement is the first chunk that's going to do this thing where it spills it down. That's only in newer versions of Excel. In previous versions, I think you just get an error here because it can't display an array value. There's nothing in these cells, by the way. They are completely empty. This is just a little display feature. This is the only one with the formula. And this is where we're going to start talking about things. So remember from my description a moment ago, I said this will return a list, and then we use small to figure out which one of those index numbers to return. And row 1 will spit 1 to the small function, which will tell it to return the lowest number, which returns 1, which is why we have 1 here. And you can see that we get the 1 right here from the if statement. So if this might help you if you're in a later version of Excel, just select the entire if statement and hit F9 right now. That's where we get this list. This list is the same as this right here. It's basically just computed it and spit it out over these cells for us. And this 1 here and the 4 and the 6 are index numbers. So it says, hey, get a value from the index range that we have right here. Get it from the first row or the second row or the third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh row, etc. So this one right here gets it from the first row, then the fourth row, then the sixth row. And you'll notice we have 1, 4, and 6. So that's how it uses the returned numbers to return the correct result over here. Now let's figure out how we actually get these values. All right, so this is the trickiest part perhaps of the if statement. This if statement only has 2 sections. This right here, where it performs its logical test, and this over here, where it returns a value if the logical test evaluates to true. Otherwise, it's going to return false. So we only have 2 chunks of things to go over here. Now let's go over this one first, and this is the new one if you watched the previous tutorial on this formula. All right, we're going to go down here, do a little equals if error, and you're going to see a bunch of trues and a bunch of falses. What does that mean? That's not very helpful, is it? Nope. So if you remember from the previous tutorial, we need this logical test. That's what this is right here. It goes into the if statement. We need it to return true and false. The if statement requires true and false in order to do something. So we need to create a statement that will return a true or a false for every value in the lookup table, the lookup range, the lookup array, this guy right here. So we need to tell the if statement, hey, true, false, false, true, false, true, false. We need to give it the true, false values. All right, so that's the mindset you have. And how I went about changing this from the previous version is I said, okay, I can't use wildcard characters in here, the asterisk, but I can use the search function. So I started with a search function right here. We pulled it out. Let's go down here, equals search. And the search function is going to look for this in either this cell or the range that I give it. And it will give me a bunch of results. The results that I get from the search function are for value, value 1, value 1, value. It returns the position of the first character it finds that you're looking for. So I'm looking for red. Okay. Well, the R begins in position 4 right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Down here, the R begins in position 1. And down here as well, position 1. And I get errors for every cell that it doesn't find red inside of. It doesn't find my lookup value, so it gives me an error. So I have this. Now how do I go about changing this from this output into a bunch of trues and falses? Well, I can take this and all you have to do is pop a comparison operator on it. So if it finds a match, it will return at least 1. So that means that the number it will return will be greater than 0. So if it's greater than 0, I just make a little comparison. Hey, the result here, is it greater than 0? And that's going to say true or false. And I get trues for every one that's greater than 0. However, look, I still have these value errors. That's no good. We need true and false. So then I take this and I just do a very simple if error. I run what I want to run. It outputs true if I get a number. Otherwise, output false. So now I will have turned all of my error values into false values. And that is how I went from the basic search here to this big formula here. And that's all that we're doing, is making it output true and false so that we can later use it in the if statement. And everywhere that we see true here, it'll go ahead and execute the next part of the if statement. The next, where is it? Okay, there we go. The next part of the if statement is this guy right here. Now, if I go ahead and run this, let's run that there. We get a bunch of index numbers, and now let me go ahead and run this. So I just hit F9 after I select it. You'll see true, false, false, true, and then you'll see a bunch of index numbers over here. So it finds true for the first one, so it goes over here and it returns the corresponding position in this list right here. So it returns a 1. False, nope, false, nope, true, yep. That's in position 4, so we go 1, 2, 3, 4. We return the value from the 4th position here. Then same for the true in the 6th position. We go all the way to the 6th position within this list and return this value. Now these values don't have to be numbers, they can be whatever they need to be. However, in this case, they need to be numbers because remember, these numbers here represent a position within the table where we would like to return a value. So 1 down here refers to ASC-1 here. This cell in the range, 2 goes down here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on. All right, I'm going to hit escape to get out of that so it doesn't save those changes, and I'm going to select this guy, and this is the one that's kind of confusing. So let me, okay, this little thing where it spills down really makes it difficult to read. So I'm going to put a period under each one of these so it will not spill it. And you see the little spill error. This is kind of very annoying. Okay, let's clean you guys up. Okay. All right, this is messing up the order I like to have for my deconstruction a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to the next part of the if statement right now. I will put it right here, equals all of this. All right, of course we have another spill. This returns the values that you saw when I just calculated this by selecting it. Where is it? This part right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. Now, remember I said that what we have to do is to get a relative index number, a relative position here that we can use to return the correct value from the index function. And we need it to be 1 for the first row in the list, 2 for the second row, 3 for the third row. So 1 for the first row. Actually, let's get a formula. See, this is our range where we're going to return a value. And we need to have index numbers that are referenced such that this is 1, this is 2, this is 3, and so on. Because that's how the index function sees this. To the index function, if I want to return a value from here, I put 1. So maybe I will just show you that right now. Let's go down here, pop the index function in there. If I want to return ASC-1, I have to input 1. Great. If I want to return from the third row, ASC-3, I have to put a 3. So we need to be able to get the correct numbers in order to return the correct value. Okay. So we have a list of trues and falses over, where is it now? Over here. yes. And this list, there we go, has a true and a false value for every value in the lookup table. And now I need to match this with the 1, this with a 2, this with a 3. I already explained that. So now we just need to make sure that we can get the correct number, okay? And we do this with just a little bit of math, but it looks confusing. We're going to use first the row function to return the row of every range in our lookup range, A2 to A8. So I'm going to calculate this right now, and we're going to get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, but that doesn't help us, because if I return a value from 2 for the first value in this list, it's going to return a value from the second row. That's not helpful. I need the position 1, the first position, to be 1, not 2. So I need to normalize this. I need to make this so that it begins with 1 and increments by 1. How do I do that in a way that works if my table isn't just in row 2 or row 1? You may have it in row 35, okay? So how do I do that? Well, just a little bit of math, okay? You subtract the very first cell from the range, the row of the very first cell. So if I calculate this, it'll give me row 2. You just subtract this from all of these guys. And when I do that, so when I go like this and subtract 2, each one of these will go down by 2. Now some people ask me, why do you do that? Because the next step is to add 1. The next step is to add 1 because 0 cannot be returned to the index function. We must return a 1 to the index function for the first value, not 0. Index sees 0 and it says, hey, I don't know what to do with that. So we have to make this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we add the 1. So great, now we have 1 to 7. But why did I go through the step of adding the 1 after subtracting the first one? Because it won't always be in row 2. It only seems really logical right now. Just subtract 1 from each of them because it's in row 2. But if you don't know what row it's going to start in, then you cannot hard code what you subtract right here. So the way to make this dynamic so that you don't have to update the +1 or what you put here for your data is just to have it like this. Subtract the row of the first value in the list and then add 1. And it'll work for wherever your data set is. Just change this guy accordingly. So that's going to cut back on errors and make your life much easier. And that's why this is set up like that. And then once you have the correct positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, then you can go ahead and return the correct positions using the if statement. So I've got all this stuff. And then I've got all of these trues and falses right here. Actually, maybe what I'll do right now is let's put these guys up here. And I'll put this right here and break this down. So here we have the logical test. And here we have what we want to return if it evaluates to true. So when it evaluates to true, it's going to return 1. Then 4, then 6. And then we can use, what is this guy? This is the if function, okay. So you can see that being returned right here. And I will pop this down right here. Perfect. And if there is no true, it returns a false. And then we put this into the small function and we use row. Here you are. Let me show you how row works just in case. So I do row with 1. It returns 1, copy it down. 2, like this, returns 2. And 3, 3. So I'm feeding this to the small function to say, hey, return the smallest value. Smallest value in this list is 1. Then, hey, return the next smallest value. It's going to be 4. And the next smallest value, it's going to be 6. And since these numbers always increment going down, up top is always going to be the smaller number. down lower is always going to be the higher number. And if you want to test that out, all you have to do in the small function is put a 1 right here, and you will see it returns 1. We can change it now to 2, and you'll see it returns 4. And we go to 3, returns 6. And next up, we should get a nice little error, num error. And that's where the if error will take care of things. And these numbers, I'm going to back it up real quick. This number right here, remember, it's just the index number. So then I take this index number and I pop it in right here. So index number of 6 returns ASC-6. Wow, that is a complex formula. There is really no way around it being a complex formula. Honestly, I just recommend that you copy paste this guy and make the changes that you need to make. You don't have to always know exactly what's going on. Maybe if in the future you're a little bit confused by this guy and you want to remind yourself how everything works, then come back to this tutorial. But in practice, I recommend learning how to use it once, then copy paste. Copy paste is your friend. You do not want to type this monster out by hand. That is for certain. And that's how you can make your wildcard lookups that return all matches in Excel. I hope you liked the tutorial. If it was helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe and accept notifications so you can see all the new tutorials.